Hello and welcome to the TMC Newsroom. My name is Rich Tehrani. Today we are at Interop 2010 in Las Vegas, and on our program is Howard Ting, who's with Palo Alto Networks. How are you, Howard?
Good. Thanks for having me, Rich.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. Can you tell me a little bit about your company, please?
Sure. So we build a next-generation firewall which is able to identify applications and control those applications, regardless of whether they come on certain ports or they use certain protocols. And what we find is that firewalls that were designed for an earlier period worked because applications could be identified based on ports and protocols. But these days, all applications run over essentially the same ports, which are 80 and 443, the web applications. And then they also use the same protocol, which is HTTP. So there's no way for any organization to be able to distinguish whether the traffic on their network is Facebook versus Skype versus Salesforce.com. They're all web apps. They all behave very differently. They all have very different risk profiles. So our customers purchase our products to be able to identify those applications and to be able to control them at a very granular level with very rich policies.
What are some of the problems that you help solve in the real world? A customer bought your product and this is now what they're able to do.
Yeah, so I think one big one is obviously compliance. Lots and lots of companies have compliance mandates that they have to adhere to. So that requires that they keep certain applications off certain segments of the network, make sure that certain users are not allowed onto certain applications. So let me give you one simple example. A lot of banks and trading firms, they have legislation that dictates that they have to log everything, all communications. So if you have an employee, a trader, who's using a web mail application like a Gmail with a chat feature, then those applications, if they're not identified and they're not being controlled by the network, then it leads to compliance problems. And so that's one very simple example. So compliance is definitely a purchase driver. Another purchase driver are threats. All the new threats these days are coming over these web applications, particularly social networking applications. So threats 5-10 years ago were DDoS attacks against the network, trying to bring a network down. But these days, threats are increasingly targeted towards users, and oftentimes are coming in over social networking
With
sites.
phishing and spear phishing and things like that.
The biggest threat that we see today is someone that posts a comment on your Facebook wall that looks like it's from your friend that says something like, hey, click here to see my latest photos.
Right.
And that, by clicking on that link, the end user has now gotten a botnet on their machine. And next time that they go do something of value, that botnet could capture their identities and log their keystrokes, which will lead to problems down the road. Or it could even do something more malicious, like allow their confidential information to leak out to the enterprise. So we think controlling these applications is a huge security challenge, and we help with that. So that's often a mandate that our clients have that we help.
So let's say I'm on my Facebook page. I click. I see a comment, and when I do that, what happens now with your solution?
So with our solution, we're able to, first of all, prevent everyone from using Facebook if there's no business need, right? So that's a first starting point. Who has a legitimate business need to use these applications? Now, you might argue that sales and marketing groups would, because they need to connect with their customers,
Sure.
They need to communicate with prospects. So sales and marketing might have a legitimate business need to use Facebook,
Sure.
but the engineering group probably doesn't, right?
Right.
And that's where a lot of intellectual property could leak. So the first thing to do is control who can actually get access to these apps. So that's the first step. Second step is scanning these things for threats. So a lot of the things that happen nowadays, we're able to identify and put a signature on. So when we see that stuff happening, we're able to block it. So we have high-speed integrated IPS right in the firewall. And that's another big part of our solution, that a lot of customers have deployed these ancillary products that we call firewall helpers. But they're really essentially features of the firewall. And the reason that they've deployed these additional products is because the firewall vendors have let them down. So the incumbent firewall vendors haven't really added a lot of innovation. That's why we have markets like IPS, URL filtering, DLP, antivirus, network AV. All of these products are essentially bolt-ons to the firewall, and they're modules of the firewall essentially, and they're being deployed because they need these capabilities and they're not getting it from their firewall. So
now, what about SIP?
That.
Do you have to deal with SIP at all?
We identify all kinds of traffic, including SIP. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've reinvented the firewall. We've put the firewall back as the most strategic security device in the enterprise network, and that's why our customers are able to consolidate their infrastructure, save a lot of cost, and then also deal with all the threats that are coming at them today.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for spending some time on the program today.
Thank you.
It was great to meet you and learn about your company.
All right, thanks, Rick.